Liam?
Thank you very much, Gabby. Good evening, everyone. Good evening from very stormy Dublin. We're experiencing a bit of a weather event here at the moment, more dramatic than normal, which isn't great this time of year at the best of times, but we'll go on. It's wonderful to be here and amazing to hear all of the contributions so far. And it's amazing to put some face to the names of people I've been in contact with over the last few months as we develop some of this content I'm going to showcase. I am an education technologist in the School of Education in UCD, so I work with Gabby and I work with Ashley, who's facilitating the event here in the School of Education. And as an education technologist, my role is to develop online blended hybrid content involving the design of that as well. And I am an educator for all of my career thus far. I'm a qualified secondary school teacher. So one of my philosophies is to bring my experience in the classroom into the digital space, and I try to design learning that is pedagogically, has pedagogical principles applied and is with the aim of empowering our students. And it has been a pleasure to be involved in the project with Child Rights Connect over the last few months, because I think it is an amazing example of empowering students and child human rights defenders. And I think following the previous contributions, it's an interesting time to think about considering all of the considerations we've had so far about the online space and the benefits and some of the pitfalls as well, which are obviously quite vast considering the integration and the advancement of the digital space over the last number of years. But it's interesting to see how online learning fits into that, particularly in the backdrop of the pandemic. So when designing online learning, there's a lot of opportunities and challenges. I think most of the opportunities and challenges have been touched on today so far, so I won't spend too long discussing them, because as I said, they are quite broad and quite vast and so integrated into society now that we're certainly not going to solve them this evening, but I know we're making some attempt. So we can reach students all around the world, which is obviously a big advantage. One thing I added in during the presentation as I listened to some of our speakers today was students can reach the world, and it's not something I'd considered when I was making the presentation first, but I think it's an interesting point to consider, that it's not about the learning that we can impart on the students through online learning, but also that the students have an opportunity to reach out to us, to reach out to others where they may not have the channels through the traditional education systems. I think with online learning, one of the most obvious benefits is you can include multimedia and engaging content. And with the pandemic, I think we heard a lot of debate around the benefit of online learning to face-to-face learning. And one of what my philosophy as an educator is not to get too dragged into that debate, and to think about how we can apply design principles, pedagogical principles to make online learning as good as possible, and to use it where appropriate, and sometimes in conjunction with face-to-face. And I think that has been one of the themes so far today, that it's not about trying to decide which is better, but it's about trying to reach the students and have the students reach us in as many, and reach the world in as many ways as possible. So I think the digital divide is a pitfall that's been discussed a lot today, and we have to be mindful if we're if by producing a lot of things online, are we contributing to the digital void, or are we seeking to narrow it somewhat? And that's a difficult consideration. Difficult to build community is another thing that can be challenged with online learning. If you're kind of producing masses of content that's going to go around the world, I think one of the pitfalls we saw in the pandemic is the lack of connection and the lack of community. that can be felt in the online space, and difficult to monitor the students' learning. And I put monitor in quotation marks because I'm not sure we need to monitor the students' learning. I hopefully, with the principles that we employed on these modules that we produced and that we try to employ in all good examples of online learning, we don't need to monitor students as they learn online, and we can trust them and we can design learning that's conducive to students being motivated to complete the learning themselves. And all of these challenges, I hope we've gone some way to address by using the design principles I'm going to touch on. And I think that's kind of the big part of what I want to speak about, is how to design effective and engaging online learning that can hopefully seek to address some of these issues. So principles applied, and I think these principles can be applied to any learning, be it online or otherwise. And I think that's one of the themes that I constantly come back to when designing online learning, is that the same principles apply for all types of learning, and they would be universal design for learning, accessibility, making the content as accessible as possible, and the presence. So even if we don't have a facilitator, we can still include and incorporate presence, which we've aimed to do in these courses, and I aim to do in any course that I'm involved in. And that could be something like an avatar, like we have here, which is Digital Gabby, who you'll see a little bit more of in a moment. And yeah, so we try to have, avatars, or you can have voice notes, or you can have, if you're doing a different type of course, you can have discussion boards, those type of things. But I think presence is really important. So when it comes to those principles, we're going to take a closer look at each of those principles now. So universal design for learning are three very important principles that are applied again to all types of learning, and that there should be multiple modes of engagement, multiple modes of action and expression, multiple modes of representation. So I'm going to take a moment to go through each of those principles, and then we will look at, when I'm finished speaking, we'll have a look at how that looks in practice. So when it comes to engagement, which I think is probably the most important one of these principles, engagement and motivation are linked. And we need students to be motivated, and we need students to be engaged if they're going to make any attempt at any learning activity, be it in the classroom or otherwise. And motivation refers to an individual's inclination, energy, direction, and drive with respect to learning and achievement. And engagement is where they're going to follow through on that motivation. And when it comes to online learning, I spoke about the benefits of having the multimedia and having the video and having the, the different interactions. But I don't think any of that has any place or has any benefit to students unless there's an intrinsic desire to learn something. So I think the engagement and motivation is divided into what's the intrinsic and what the extrinsic. And I think from hearing speakers today, it's very interesting to hear some of the intrinsic ideas that students some of the intrinsic reasons that students are now, and Emma said it in her presentation at the start, more motivated than ever to learn, to take to the online space, to express and communicate their feelings on many of the issues and human rights concerns and child rights concerns that exist at the moment. And I think when I'm designing online learning, I try to work with the great groups like Child's Right Connect or with Gabby and UCD to try and tap into those intrinsic motivations that students have and try to incorporate them throughout the course. Because before you even think about videos or any of that, you need to get to those intrinsic motivations. And some of those could be curiosity, responsibility, autonomy, pride, and defending rights. And I think when you really go to consider, even though I have a kind of balance in the middle, when you look at the extrinsic things that we can put in online learning, like interactions, quizzes, checklists, and badges, as good as they can be, they're not going to mean a whole lot unless we have the things on the left-hand side here, which are very powerful very powerful considerations. And I think that it's been touched on throughout the presentations today, that students and children all around the world are really coming to a point where they want to express those, they want to learn, there's an appetite, and then the medium of online can be matched with that to incorporate interaction, incorporate the quizzes, incorporate the checklist. But I think for me, the most important thing is that you're not guided by what's on the right, you're guided by what's on the left. And I think as educators, and all of the great work, all of that we've heard about so far this evening, and is going across the world, that's what's going to make a difference on the left hand side, and then we can put it together on the right hand side in the online space. The next one is action and expression. So that is that students in online learning, that they have multiple ways to express themselves, they have multiple things to do. This is a bit more now about the extrinsic motivations and the extrinsic engagement that we have in online learning. So we have knowledge checks in the course I'm going to show in a minute, the course I'm going to show in a moment. We have knowledge checks, we have students inputting into notebooks. It's also important now that students are able to access learning, I think, on multiple devices. I think as much as possible, online learning should mirror the experience that that students have when they go to their favorite sites, social media sites. I'm just going to go back a slide there if I can. Sorry. Yeah, so as much as possible so that they can, oopsie, one moment. Let's go over here. Yeah, sorry. So students have multiple ways to access, as they would with their normal interaction with the internet, because sometimes I think we're so focused on the learning side, we forget how used to the internet and these digital native students, which is not going to change anytime soon. So I think we have to try and incorporate multiple devices, and along with that, we have flexibility so that students can access at the time that suits them, particularly if we're going to have a global audience, that we don't have, it's best as possible that content is recorded and that it's available, throughout the 24 hours, 7 days a week, that students can come back to it, that they can go to it, that they can dip in and out what's useful to them and maybe what they're more experienced in. Then it comes to representation and accessibility. So I think it's inclusivity. And I think that's been touched on as well in a lot of the presentations today, particularly with the digital divide. So we want to make sure that that content is as inclusive as possible, culturally sensitive as possible. And then we go to content accessibility. So obviously that's making sure that the students or the children can access the content easily, that it's easy to get through, that's easy to follow. And I mean, that's linked to the inclusivity as well. And again, that's linked to it being multilingual, so that we have content produced in as many languages as possible, so that again, it's easy to access, and then so that it's scaffolded and easy for them to follow, so that there's no moderator or no teacher, they can go from topic to topic, and it's well navigated, well structured, it makes sense, and it follows a clear guide. I think as well, content accessibility, if it goes back to the engagement. And sometimes with online content, we can put so much into the interactivity and trying to make videos that the accessibility can lose a little bit. And more often than not, the most accessible content is in text format, because students can go back to it. They don't need high-end connections. They don't need to load multiple videos. And with text, you can do quite a lot. You can make buttons, and that comes down to the scaffolding and the layout and how you structure it. So for presence in our course, our biggest example of presence throughout the course was, digital Gabby, who was kind of it seems like maybe a trivial point, but actually it's quite a powerful consistency that goes from the start of the course to the end of the course. And just by using those avatars, I think you give it the feel of you give that presence, which is really important, I think, in online learning. So after looking at all of the principles, what I would like to do now is have a look at some of our courses that we designed with the CRC Child's Right Connect. And I'm going to just start with, sorry, I'm going to get this out of the way. So I'll have a look here at our, and go back to the start. So this is our, sorry, the Zoom controls a little bit. So the right to defend the environment. So this is a short module for children as human rights defenders that they can work through. So we have children, we have the right to defend the environment. We have the UPR and me sharing your views with the UN on human rights. We have your pocket guide on reporting to the UN about child's right in your country. And we have them in French, Spanish, and English. So I'm going to have a quick look at the French CRC module there. And here we have the UNEP Spanish module as well. So I'm going to go through them in English, but you can see the versions there. And I want to kind of go through considering the design principles that we looked at: universal design for learning, the engagement, the multimedia, the representation, all of those things. And hopefully they're incorporated throughout our learning. So you can see here, that's the first page on the UNEP one. So we have a video to start with, and Digital Gabby comes in to kind of introduce the module, and then they work on through. Like I say, I think text can be very powerful if used with good headings and hierarchically and well scaffolded. They work through here. What are human rights? What is a child human rights defender? And I think a lot of it was about bringing together some of the truly excellent resources that the CRC have already developed, and kind of bringing them together using those design principles. So scaffolding, giving it some purpose, because the students, when they have that intrinsic desire to learn, it's about pointing them in the right direction to the resources. And so many of the resources already exist. Many of them you've outlined earlier on today. So then they work on through different presentations, different activities. So again, it's not about the bells and whistles for the sake of bells and whistles. It's about getting all of those resources together in a purposeful way, and using multi modes of representation again. So you can see here we have a short video.
Hello everyone.
And then we can go on to the next one, which is the Human Rights Council. So obviously I'm going through them quite quickly. Hopefully students will take their time, and hopefully they're taking their time because they have that intrinsic desire to learn about all these things. And I think it's up to us to try and build those motivations, and then to use the extrinsic things like the interactions, etc., to achieve that. So they come through that. I'm gonna have a quick look at the, we'll go for the URP one here. So again, it's the same kind of layout, but obviously the content is different. We have Digital Gabby again. Again, that presence and consistency, really important. They have a notebook, which is the action and expression. So different ways to express themselves. And then we'll go down here. We have so a kind of pathway from the start of before the UPR review, and they work all the way through all of the different things that will happen all the way until they get to Geneva and the UPR review. And then we have quizzes. Again, these are the extrinsic things that the students are going to do. They have different things they're going to match. Again, scaffolded, so they learn the content and then they go and they show what they've learned. They're checking their own knowledge. They don't need a moderator. They can kind of do it themselves. So then when they finish, So students work through the UPR review here, different timeline. And then at the very last thing, when students are finished, they come back down to their learning outcomes. I understand what the UPR is. I can identify the status of any country. I can find and review, and then they're finished. And then we're hoping to put in some certification there as well. So that's pretty much it. So I've been through the design principle and hopefully showed you what it looks like in practice. And thank you very much.